It's my pleasure to introduce Marna to the U3A. Marna de Lange has a civil engineering degree from the University of Stellenbosch. She's a registered professional engineer in South Africa and has been very active as a consulting engineer and is still active, and also in the engineering institutions such as the South African Institution of Agricultural Engineers and the Engineering Council of South Africa. She has devoted her career to making engineering relevant to the public in the most disadvantaged and under-resourced echelons of society. Here in particular, the improvement of food security of poor families has been her focus. She has several awards, such as the King Hassan II Young Professional Paper Award in 2000, and the Women in Water Award from the Minister of Water Affairs, then Ronnie Casrels, in 2002. She was appointed Gender Ambassador to the Second World Water Forum in The Hague in 2003. Marna has served on the Minister of Water Affairs' Advisory Council and committees of several international bodies regarding the role of water in agriculture, food security, and poverty eradication. In recognition of her outstanding contribution in engineering, strengthened by a demonstration of social conscience and a dedication to a high level of altruism, she was elected by her peers as Fellow to the prestigious South African Academy of Engineers in 2016. Thank you very much for being with us today, Marna, and over to you.
Thank you, Peter. That was a very kind and generous introduction. I've not thought about many of those things in a long, long time. And I think what for me has been a constant over all these years is the degree to which we've been blessed to actually have the opportunity to be out in the communities and increasingly at a larger scale and reaching more people. The topic of the talk, Peter emphasized the role of water in the rural economy and upliftment. And the work that we do really is at what's called the bottom of the pyramid. So I want to start there and go through and leave it to you at the end of this to interpret with me. Is it possible to build our GDP from the dinner table up? And does it matter? And what happens if we don't? So let's launch straight into it. I don't think there's much question about the fact that we need a different future to the path that we've been on. And in this regard, the Broad-Based Livelihoods program was designed over a number of decades. It has come into being, and it's really been implemented now in its current format since soccer year. You remember 2010, which was such a milestone in our history. It really is a numbers game. We're talking about broad-based livelihoods as a way of reaching as many people as possible in order to grow the economy, but to grow it in a different way, recognizing that our biggest asset are the people of this country, advocating that we really should not think about poor people as a problem, but think about them as the solution to their own problem in terms of the contribution that the latent contribution, the latent potential that is sitting there that can make a contribution to our economy and our country's well-being. In the broad-based livelihoods approach, we use good food as a catalyst and a stepping stone, giving people the hope that they can actually feed their families properly, and then discovering through excess production how easy it is to get into business development of business activities. So what we're emphasizing is this whole program is about getting people economically active where they are, with what they have, doing what they can. So let's have a look at why first. When we refer to the bottom of the pyramid, you may know the book by J.K. Pralahad of a couple of years ago, where he was speaking about the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. If one analyzes the pyramid a little bit, the socioeconomic pyramid, whenever you speak to a person, most of them think they're at the bottom of the pyramid. But if we look at the statistics in our country, the majority of people earn below 3,000 Rand a month. And the moment one realizes that, we realize that most of us are really very, very high up in this pyramid, that in fact the pyramid is becoming more and more dangerous because we have more and more people at the bottom and we've got a big divide and then a smaller and smaller number of people at the top. And this, of course, is a very unstable situation. And so what we're aiming at is we're saying, well, can we find ways for this entire pyramid to move up so that everyone is better off? And then how do we go about that? And so certainly there is a fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, but can we find ways of making the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid not go in solely into companies designing products to sell to the poor, but to look at ways in which the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid can actually work for the people at the bottom of the pyramid. So we know that money flows in our country, very acutely so, consists of cash flowing into the poorer sectors of society, but never sticking, because immediately on the day that those SASSA payments are paid in, most of it flows directly out in the form of cash and for food and goods that come in. And those food and goods come mostly from what we call the GDP engine, and which sits at the top of the pyramid for production, manufacturing, etc. So where does this cash come from? Well, of course, that comes from the tax rands that goes to government from the activity of the GDP engine. So what's happening down at the bottom? Isn't there a GDP engine working there as well? And we know that it has been very, very low. And that in fact, what we're arguing is if we can get the economic activity happening at all levels of society, then this whole pyramid can indeed start moving up. So the question still remains, how? How do we do that? And so what we're advocating is to think about what's happening in our poorest communities and to find ways for the cash that flows into those communities, which can be very, very substantive. Someone gave me a figure yesterday for Pofadder. I don't know who of you know Pofadder in the Kaima municipality in Bosmanland. And the money flowing into Pofadder on a monthly basis is between 20 and 30 million rand per month. And I had a discussion one day with one of the councillors of Nyakalong community in the Free State, looking at his community. And I told him the sorts of monies that flow into his community on a monthly basis, which was in the order of about 22 million a month. And he was astounded. And I said, well, just tell me, can you see the effect of that money flowing in here? And he said, I can't. And he said to me, well, I can see what you're saying is that we need to retain the money inside the community and have it circulating in the community so that the wealth building can happen. And then he proceeded to tell me that he has had a very good plan and he's already got a petition with 1,000 signatures for a jet stores to open inside his community. And he was presenting this as a solution for keeping the money in the community because the business is in the community, not way over there in Welkom. And then I said to him, and then where is the money going to flow to then? And it struck him like lightning that even having the shop there is still just in a way of even more money flowing more easily out of his community. So we really are talking about how can we help people to retain the monies in their community. And that is what the BBL program, the Broad-Based Livelihoods program, is about. It's based on our belief that nobody has nothing. This is an expression that one of our key facilitators, a pastor, Cletus Damba from Zimbabwe originally, that he has been using for many, many years. One of the foundational principles of development is that it's most sustainable when people can start with what they have and with what they know and build on that. And that's what the Broad-Based Livelihoods program is about. It's the key, and the key is nutrition. I won't go through this in detail, but to share with you that the Department of Water Affairs, the Water Research Commission, Department of Agriculture, the processes at the World Summit, all these processes have all contributed to shaping the content and the approach that is currently happening in the Broad-Based Livelihoods program. And currently we're active in 8 provinces with just over 300 villages, communities, urban and rural, and it's still growing. BBL captures people's imagination and inspires them to build better livelihoods with whatever they have at home. And the reason we're starting with food is because that is of such fundamental importance to a person who earns below no income and at top level of 3,000 per month. The Germans, what was previously known as GTZ and is now GZI, have always had this approach where they say there's no development without discomfort. So in their development approach, the first thing they do is make sure that people get very, very uncomfortable about where they find themselves. So what we're using as a mechanism to create that discomfort is to actually share with people the simple information about balanced diet and what happens if your children don't get that balanced diet from a very early age onwards. And we've captured that in what we call the food robot. And the food robot, I rediscovered the other day that I have to count my words when I have an international audience, because after a while, some people from the UK said to me, "You do mean a traffic light, don't you?" Now, the robot food chart is a very simplified way of presenting a balanced diet, consisting of your go foods, which are the starches, the grow foods, which are the proteins, and then the glow foods for good health, which are the micronutrients. And in our country, the greatest deficiency in diets, and which is wreaking havoc with not only our health, but very particularly with our economic potential, is the lack of micronutrients. And that is quite simply available from fruit and vegetables, and therefore something over which the caretakers of the families can gain control quite manageably. So when we share this information with people in the communities, the first thing they will say is that we can see how important it is for our children to have these foods. You may know the work that has been done in recent years. We were always talking about the importance of good nutrition in the first 5 years of life, and that has shifted down now to the first 1,000 days of life, the realization that between conception and the second birthday is the critical period where children have to get this balanced diet, and particularly with a focus on the micronutrients, because without this, a child gets stunted, both physically and mentally. And right there is where the damage to our national capacity is done. Because in this lovely country of ours, the stunting rate is at 26%. It means that more than a quarter of our children are actually damaged before they reach the age of 2. And so you can see how important it is for us to address that. And the astonishing thing is how easy it is to do it. Well, how do people respond? They say, we cannot afford it. And then we say, well, can you grow it yourself? And then they say, we have no water. So we then share with them the thought of using grey water and harvested rainwater for production, and then they're very keen to make a start. And then this is typically the outcome of that process. You can see here the diversity of what's being planted. The robot food chart has got built into it a little calendar, and where a person in the house has the responsibility, normally the kids, to tick off every single day. Did we get all our colors today? And you can see that from the production, there's the diversity. So people are encouraged to plant the whole diversity of foods that are necessary in the diet in their gardens. And then very quickly they go into overproduction. And once they're into overproduction, it makes it very easy to start teaching them to keep record of income as well as expenses and to calculate the profit and loss. And once they've done that, there's nothing standing in their way to start trading with a variety of other things. What this does is it requires no grand infrastructure. It requires no intense organization of people into cooperatives or into projects and with shared finances that inevitably lead to white elephants and fights, because everyone can do it wherever they are. Water is indeed still a scarce entity, and the methods that we've developed is to use a simple bucket and to create a drip irrigation system out of it. Not proprietary off-the-shelf stuff, but we actually teach them how to make their own drippers. And because the distances are very short, the engineering is dead easy because the coefficient of variance of the dripping tempo over that short distance doesn't need sophisticated equipment. The other thing that we also do is to teach them how to build a little sand filter straight into the bucket so that they can use grey water, and then they have nice, good quality water going into their soils. This is something that gets town and regional planners quite excited, the change in utilization of the landscape. So here you have this lady who used to have a lawn that she was battling to keep going, and she turned that into full stomachs. One of the important things is the soil preparation and planting methods are based on permaculture, meaning that no chemicals are necessary, and most importantly, that the things that people need to purchase in order to get going is absolutely minimal. We're talking about a pack of seed from Pick n Pay for typically between 20 and 25 Rand for a packet of seed, which is way too much. For instance, green pepper, you have something like 655 seeds in that little packet. And so people exchange seeds amongst themselves. The deep trenching method that we're teaching them, where you literally dig out and then fill back with organic waste, results in incredible yields and very good quality. And that is very, very encouraging for people when they're harvesting quality and quantities that they haven't seen before. There are these little greenhouse tunnels, net structures that we teach them how to build, and we supply the materials to people who have complied with a couple of criteria. And that is that they have prepared their gardens in the way that we've taught them and that they have already planted. And then one of the most important criteria is they must show us that they have gone and taught 3 further households and help them to establish their own gardens as well. And once they have, we call that pinda pinda, which is the Zulu word for repeat. So repeat, repeat. And the objective with that is clear, is to make sure that this keeps on spreading by word of mouth and by people actually reaching out and helping their neighbors. That process, as well as the way in which people are taught to help each other in building the tunnels, is incredibly important in overcoming a very specific problem in our communities, and that is jealousy. So by doing it in this way, everybody works together, but everybody has their own private garden. So in 2 ways, you are avoiding the jealousies that are very typically very damaging to most development initiatives. It also means that the knowledge is shared. So if someone has forgotten how to do a specific thing, there are lots of people around them that can help remind each other on how to do it. So that's why we call building the tunnels, building community. This is my sister's little boy, and she has a tunnel at home, has had it now for almost 8 years. And he grew up knowing exactly where in the tunnel he can go and harvest, dig up some potatoes, and where he can go for a tomato. Quite remarkable to see this young man developing and retaining a love for planting. So the quality of the construction is very important. We've experimented with a lot of different ways to do the arches. In the beginning, with the first type of arrangement we had, it took a construction team a day and a half to build 1 tunnel. And we had to bring experienced construction people in from village to village, transporting people from Pretoria to KZN, for instance, to go and build the tunnels. And then we kept on adjusting the construction method until now, with just 1 facilitator teaching people who come on the day from the community. We've reached the point where we can sometimes build 20 tunnels in 1 day. That makes a huge difference to the ability to go to scale with this and leaving the skills in the village. I said earlier that we teach people from the excess production how to get into business. And there's very simple layouts of recording formats that we use. And one of the first ones we introduce, it's far more pleasant to keep track of one's incomes than it is to keep track of expenses. And there's a huge resistance to record keeping. The other day, one of the communities with the one group that have really started doing their recording said to the facilitator, yes, we used to have a war against the pen, but we have we have made peace with the pen. And so one of the things that we include, we call this the sales and savings sheet, is from every single transaction to take a little amount out of what you've received and put that into a savings bottle, literally any container that you have, but they very often take a 2-liter cool drink bottle, paste it over with some paper, cut a slot in, and there's the piggy bank. But the money that goes into that piggy bank is accumulating towards a savings target. And what they are encouraged to save for is not normal household expenditures, but we encourage them to save for something that makes money babies. And those of you who have read the book on the richest man in Babylon will know where that expression comes from. But it is important. One of the things that we've done recently with this promise of the 350 rand per household is to put the challenge to people to think of ways in which they can take 350 rand and double it. And then the ideas really start rolling about how to use money to make money. And it's very, very small, simple things for a start. Just to share another example with you, one of the ladies in Free State in Kutlano, she used to have a secondhand clothes business. She was buying and selling secondhand clothes, and COVID really, really hit her hard. She couldn't sell any longer. And then, of course, in a very short space of time, she'd already spent all the money that she'd actually retained to buy stock. So since the first lockdown in 2020, she has been stuck because now she doesn't have money to buy stock again so that she can resume her business. And it was incredible to see after the training how the other members in the learning group started helping her to make plans about how she can start very small, just by buying sweets and selling sweets and retaining money from those sales activities to slowly build up enough cash to start restocking. And I can report that it's going really well with that. For us, we call that the My Business. And one of the most important things that happen is not just mobilizing people into starting to do business, but those who've had businesses and were not making ends meet. And very often businesses come to a stop because of people not paying. So one of the things we are advising people is to stop supplying goods to people on credit and to protect their own businesses in that way. And the other very important principle is not to confuse income for profit. And when they grasp those two things, then very, very often they are able to restart their businesses and on a much healthier footing. One of the things that we have been looking at is the income potential from the start off with a little garden like this. And we can say with confidence that it's even just with spinach, it's very easy to generate 10,000 Rand out of a tunnel like that. And then if we take those figures, this is about looking at the relationships between vendors, street vendors, and then household producers. And we were looking at, instead of this man going to the fresh produce market every week, how much of the work that he's doing, the produce that he's purchasing, can he actually purchase from his neighbors nearby instead? It doesn't work very well for a variety of reasons, but it's a very interesting topic in itself to see how these linkages within the townships can be made to work better for the entire economic system. And it's a whole second economy separate from the large ones that we are familiar with, and one that should not be underestimated. This is very, very important to realize the significance of 160 Rand made in one day for a person living below 3,000 a month. It all starts with a vision. This is Mr. Kubeka. They live in this house, which they've built themselves on a relatively small plot. They had one more similar shack behind this one, and that was the sum total of the yard that they had available. They live in Tsakani, extension 9, near Boksburg. And when he first attended our training about 5 years ago, he sat down with his wife and he said to her, we have no space for planting, and we do have the rental room at the back, and I'm going to remove that rental room so that I have a 6x4 area available where I can start planting. She was very hesitant about that, but she has a lot of respect for her husband, and she agreed. And that was his first tunnel, just big enough for a tunnel to go in there. Very soon after that, he started negotiating with his neighbor. His neighbor has a similar yard, but he has a little patch of lawn, which Sipho was cutting for him for a monthly fee of 50 Rand. So then Sipho negotiated with the neighbor and said, I'm going to cut your lawn for you for free in future, but in exchange, can I please use the piece of land behind your house because I want to extend my planting? And they agreed. Not long after that, from his excess, he started selling to spaza shops and street vendors in his immediate area. And not long after that, they cut an opening into their sitting room area and made their own market there. And then not long after that, they started expanding. He negotiated for a larger piece of land. I can tell you that at the moment, he has about half a hectare under production. So the question is, with so many people in production, wouldn't it flood the market? Which is a very good question. So we looked at those figures. The turnover at Johannesburg Fresh Produce Market in 2016 was 5 billion in vegetables and 2 billion in fruits. But the interesting figure is that 2/3 of those vegetables are actually sold to informal traders, which go into the townships. And in other words, that 3 billion is actually the purchasing power that's currently going into vegetables out of our townships. That is the local market potential. And so we call that import replacement, because anything that's produced there and not imported from the national fresh produce market is in fact growing of the local economy. Won't go into detail in this, but this is all the relationships between the national fresh produce market, the grocers, the traders, and the end users, those who cook. And there's a very big story in here in stimulating the myriad of relationships between this and making sure that this fortune at the bottom of the pyramid that we're talking about here is in fact money flowing into the pockets of local producers, or a bigger proportion of it. So what is the earning potential for producers like this? How many people can actually make something extra out of this type of production? So we looked specifically at Tsakani Extension 9, where the Kubeka stay, and calculated that just in their area, if the households living there are spending 25 Rand per household per week, so that's 10 Rand for a bunch of spinach, 10 Rand for some tomatoes, and another 5 Rand for something. And remember, that's per week. So this is a very low estimate of purchasing habits. That local market is more than 4.5 million a year. And at 10,000 coming out of a tunnel, that's enough for those additional incomes for more than 400 households. So very, very significant. This slide is just to emphasize how people's experience of getting into trade then encourages them to start all sorts of different other businesses. It's also very powerful to know that the sort of things that happen here give people a chance to make a statement about their own view on life. This particular person is from a disabled program, and they started planting, and very proud of the fact that they are giving food away to others instead of being just the recipients of assistance. We have the ability to have 350 households receiving tunnels after doing what they required to do, then it means that those 350 tunnels have created income earning potential at the bottom of the pyramid of 3.5 million. And that's an annual figure. It's not a once off. We believe very strongly that this method of encouraging people to be in a relationship with each other, which is mutually encouraging, but not with any mutual economic dependence, is a very powerful way of taking the economy forward. We've just recently done a calculation to look at this bottom of the pyramid. In South Africa, I'm now talking 2011 figures, the last census that we had at the time 9 million, just over 9 million households that were below that income level that we're talking about. One addition of 10 Rand expendable income per day. Just think about that for a moment. If each of those 9 million families are able to generate 10 Rand per day extra through their own effort, then it means that people in the 3,000 Rand a month category will experience a 10%, let's call it salary increase. Whereas people in the 400 Rand a month category will be experiencing a 78% salary increase through their own efforts, just by generating 10 Rand a day extra. 10 Rand is what one bunch of spinach costs. So by producing and selling one bunch per day extra, this is the effect on their financial situation at home. It's very, very hard for us to think that 10 Rand a day can make that sort of difference. But what does that mean for the economy? Well, you can quickly do that calculation. And I was quite shocked to find that this means 33 billion Rand per year extra generated of GDP. 33 billion with a B. So how significant is that? I looked at the same year and I found a figure for the total agricultural export earnings for 2011, and that was 10 billion. So that means if the poorest households in our country can generate 10 Rand a day extra, they'll be generating 3 times what we are earning in terms of our total agricultural exports. So it's not insignificant. I have a couple of videos that I can share with you. I'm going to show you just a short 2-minute clip. There's another collection of videos, some are 10 minutes and so, but if you like, you can just watch them afterwards. I can share YouTube links to be distributed to people who are interested.
It's been like wildfire. So in our program, we teach people to be self-sufficient first. And then once they are self-sufficient, during that process, they start training each other. So that there's a, should I say, continual existence of the project, even if we are not there. Because now we've given these people the relevant skill they've been looking for. They know how to farm, they know how to look after their gardens, they know how to do irrigation, they know how to do all these things, but these are good things that you can't keep to yourself. So we then designed a content called Pinda Pinda, whereby the other person is training the next and the next is training the next, so that we have what we call sustainability. Even if the facilitators are no longer there in that community, the existence is still continual, you know. They continue training one another. They continue to find the best possible solutions as a community. That's where we get the greatest sustainability. And the most important thing is that everyone is doing their own thing, but then they are able to seek advice from one another. They are able to teach each other. So that's the greatest content we ever had when it comes to Pinda Pinda. Because you find that there is great impact, not only from class, but from also the people that attended class, because now they are becoming their very own facilitator within that particular community. So that's where the growth is. That's how a simple project like the BBL will just grow and will just flourish within different communities. It's been like wildfire.
If I may bring this to conclusion, none of this is possible without people, and none of this is possible without water. I mentioned that this is extending to 8 provinces by now. It's about to start in the 9th province, which is yours, the Western Cape, and in 300 plus villages at the moment, meaning that there's a lot of villages that still need to be reached with this. And that is why the Pinda Pinda is so important, because it literally does go from village to village through people sharing with their families living in other villages and so on. For me, the most important thing remains that we need to get our ordinary people in ordinary villages in every nook and cranny of this country economically active of their own volition. And that is what we are aiming to do, and that we are very blessed to actually have quite remarkable success with. So thank you, and please, any questions or conversation, I would be very happy to hear your ideas.
Thank you so much, Marna. That was wonderful. Let's open it for questions.
Marna, thanks very much. How do the plants become pollinated within the tunnel?
These are not plastic structures, they're net structures. So the apertures in the net is sufficient for those pollination processes to take place.
In the olden days, we know that most towns had a marketplace, and I was wondering whether something like that is also maybe thought of or on the cards, that that people can take their stuff to a place and they go and sell it there.
As we speak, we have one of our teams up in Northern Cape, in Pofadderpella, Onseepkans, and even Little Witbank. I don't know if you know that there's a Witbank up there, about an hour and a half all along the Orange River towards Goodhouse. And in every one of those villages, we are currently linking up with the soccer league. Soccer is a big, big thing in the Northern Cape. And to try and find a way of establishing village market processes linked to this one thing, which is just still the social thing that brings people together. We've done a similar thing in the Free State, but it's absolutely important for people in these villages to trade more and more with each other. And one of the other ways that we are doing that is by having talent shows. And currently we have 80 entries for the Bushmanland talent show. And the whole idea is that they come and show what they can do, but then they also sit down and work out and present how they're going to start making money from the talents that they've received from the Lord. So there's so many ways in which the creativity can start blossoming once one starts thinking about what is on the shop shelves that my neighbors are purchasing every month, which in fact we could be making and selling right here from our own village. And that's the only way to build those second economies, especially in mining communities that are just headed for a ghost town sort of situation once those mines start closing down.
Yeah, Marna, what struck me in your presentation is the respect and dignity that you have right throughout the process. Is that inclusive in your program as well, or is it just by the example and seeing the positivities coming out of it that you managed to maintain that dignity and respect?
Mick, I respect you for noticing that. The entire team is completely devoted to the Lord, and we base what we do on the principles of Scripture. We know that we're all equal before the Lord. And then on earth, we get confused about thinking about equality and equal outcomes and all sorts of things that are not that are really confusing and not foundational. Respect for the poorest of the poor, I think, is a very, very rigorous test of where a society finds itself at. And it is so important for people to be able to have respect for everyone around them, but also for themselves. It's just so fundamental and foundational, and the consequences of treating people with respect and seeing people treat each other with more and more respect, it's different. It's different because it's not normal, it's not usual, but it's incredibly powerful.
Thank you, Marna. You have a very, very positive message for all of us. It's so refreshing to have something positive where we can see that things are really happening and that there is progress. So, you know, I think that we can feel inspired by the message that is so positive this morning about how these rural communities are being able to function more positively. So from my side, thank you for that.
Thank you, Letitia.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for answering that question, and it's just fantastic that it can spread like wildfire, and the sooner we get that going, the better.
One of our programs is called My Future. We started with the horticulture one, which we call the BBL, Broad-Based Livelihood, My Food. And then the next one I mentioned was My Business. And then we realized, but there's still lots of people in the villages who really, really are not interested in planting their own food. It's just human nature. And also people who are just not interested in going into business. And so we started another sub-program called My Future. That is a 5-part training course that helps people to really discover their talents. They're focused on that. And particularly in Untitled, which was in the news very recently because, you know, they have a very big COVID problem right now, and there's just the clinic isn't staffed, and therefore there's no vaccination going on. There's no guidance on adhering with COVID protocols and so on. It's apparently the village, the community in the whole world with the highest alcohol fetal syndrome. I can't verify that, but that is the sorts of problems and social ills that community has had to deal with. And this morning in the huddle, I've told Peter every morning we have a huddle where all the facilitators call in from wherever they are in the country, and then we have a 3/4 of an hour, everybody saying what happened yesterday and what are they doing today. And in this morning's huddle, the news from Untitled was that all the people who were part of the My Future program in the past year have all got jobs. That is just remarkable. And so we're following up on that. A big drive for us with the BBL program at the moment is the diversification, so that we have more and more and more and more and more opportunities for people. And it's all about self-determination. So there's no handouts, there's no promises, there's nothing. There's believe in yourself, work at it, be determined. People are responding. People are just marvelous. They are responding amid very, very difficult circumstances. So it's a hopeful message, and I'm very, very pleased and happy and blessed to be sharing it with you. Yeah.
I think we can all do a bit more pinda. That's very positive and very inspiring. Thank you, everybody.
Just from my side too, thank you very much, Marna, for the trouble you took and the excellent presentation. Very inspiring, as you've heard. Thank you very much.